I'm Anna,
I'm Jessica.
and this is the Paranoia Pair.
So, my topic today is on Unit 731.
The only thing I know about this is it's like human
Ye-
experimentation.
yes. And we've talked about a few human experimentations on the podcast so far. But I think Unit 731 might be one of the heaviest of the subject matter
Mhm.
we've covered.
It's really fucked up.
Yeah. And until the 80s, the Japanese government didn't even admit that it had ever happened. They denied it. Um At the time, Imperial Japan had made its move into northeastern China during the Second World War and gained control. And some of the content warning, I guess we should probably have for this one is a strong disclaimer for graphic and violent content. This episode's going to cover some very heavy subject matter, including like sexual assault,
Mhm.
torture, and even a little bit of child abuse. I'm not going to talk about that much because no one wants to hear about that.
Yeah.
It's a really heartbreaking topic, but it's important for us to know about it because they say that the past repeats itself, and this is a reminder of exactly why we as humans need to do better. On June 17th, 1925, the nations of the world came together to sign the Geneva Protocol, which was an agreement between the countries to never use chemical or biological weapons against one another again. This came after the devastating loss of life during World War I and the devastation that came from using poison gases during the war. Casualties were thought to reach up to 1 million, and many of whom were just innocent civilians. On September 18th, 1931, Imperial Japan invaded Manchuria, which within 5 months, they had a rather large portion of northeast China under their control. During World War I, Japanese military saw firsthand the potential of chemical warfare and thought it would be an integral part of any future war. Um, and then them using them making the Geneva Protocol just
Mhm.
further solidified why Japan thought the chemical warfare was such an important thing to learn about because of the fact that they were basically banning it. So
Mhm.
they're like, oh damn, that's some good stuff.
We need to learn about this.
Yeah. Um an individual we will talk about a lot today is Shiro Ishii. He was an army surgeon. He really ended up advocating for the bioweapons program, and he got this to the right people because higher ups met this request with a positive response. Um, and Japan signed the Geneva Protocol, by the way. They agreed, they signed that they were not going to use chemical warfare, but that obviously didn't. So this had to be done. Because they signed the Geneva Protocol, they could not begin developing a bioweapons program openly. So this had to be done far from their homeland. Since Japan had control over Manchuria, in 1932, Shiro Ishii was sent there to begin his research at a prison where they would have an abundance of test subjects. At this location, the cruelty began. Some of the experiments being done were purposefully infecting victims with the bubonic plague, draining victims of their blood at regular intervals to see how long they would last, and live vivisections with no anesthetic,
Those vivisections.
cutting them open. Dissections, basically, but
What the
alive.
fuck?
So, they would usually they just cut open the chest cavity and start grabbing organs out. And the people would be alive during it. Sometimes they would use chloroform to knock them out, but a lot of times they would end up waking up during the procedure. So they would use live vivisections with no anesthetic so scientists could study each stage of the infection or illness from inside of the body. See how it affects the liver and the
You
heart.
can't do that after they've died from the infection.
Heavens no, they wanted to see firsthand how it was affecting them. In 1934, there was a prison break, and all the prisoners who broke out were found and executed. And then in 1935, an explosion went off within the facility. So the prison was then shut down. They were no longer using that as a base
Mhm.
for their research. Not long after, the staff was sent to start a new facility outside of Harbin to start the research again. But this time, Shiro Ishii was in charge of it, and things get much worse.
Was it another prison?
No,
Okay.
it's bigger though. They had way more room.
Okay.
A quote from Shiro Ishii that kind of puts things into perspective of how cruel of a person he was
Mhm.
was, quote, A doctor's God given mission is to challenge all varieties of disease causing microorganisms, to block all roads of intrusion into the human body, to annihilate all foreign matter resident in our bodies, and to devise the most expeditious treatment possible. However, the research we are now about to embark on is the complete opposite of these principles. It may cause some of us to anguish as doctors. We pursue this research for the double medical thrill as a scientist, probing to discover the truth in natural science, and as a military person, to build a powerful military weapon against the enemy. Unquote. So he basically is like, yeah, fuck that code.
Yeah, he's like, basically, we're gonna do some fucked up shit.
We're going off the books here. Most of the prisoners at Unit 731 were Chinese and Russian civilians, prisoners of war, Koreans, and there was rumored to have been some European and American prisoners.
I did not know that part. I was just under the impression that it was only like Chinese subjects.
Yeah, and there was even a case where one of the staff ended up catching one of the diseases and
They became part of the experiment. So they're even turning on their own
Yeah,
people.
they vivisected him. Once each prisoner was brought in and processed, and then dubbed as healthy, they would lose their name and just become a number. To keep from being too affected by what they were doing, the staff made them call the prisoners Manchura or logs.
Logs?
Because killing them was like cutting down a tree. So all the staff referred to the humans, the victims, as logs to make it easier on their conscience.
Just like another element of dehumanizing them.
The purpose of this was for biological and chemical warfare, but it was called to the public, it was the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army. So the public did not know. So in the beginning, the purpose of this facility was strictly biological warfare, but it became obvious that with time, the atrocities that went on behind closed doors were for nothing but morbid curiosity. Victims were intentionally infected with things like the bubonic plague, typhoid, dysentery, anthrax, and venereal diseases such as syphilis and gonorrhea.
What is with everyone's obsession with syphilis?
So at the time, they were doing this because, what were they called? There was a big thing because of the military. I can't remember what they're called. They were like called welcome women or something. Comfort women. That's what they're called. Because of the comfort women, there was like an increase in venereal diseases in the Japanese army. So they wanted to study and find treatments and how to avoid it. So that's why they were so like, that's why part of their thing was about studying the effects of syphilis and gonorrhea.
Basically everything from the Tuskegee experiment.
Yeah. Throughout the infection or illnesses, the victims were heavily monitored to watch the time frame of the illness. And many times the victims would be vivisected alive with no anesthesia. They would also place victims randomly around grenades to see at what range the blast would be lethal, survivable, and what would cause severe wounds. Those who survived would be used for medics to improve new techniques and practice battlefield medicine. The same would be done with flamethrowers to see at what distance the flamethrower would most affect you, or what would be survivable. Another experiment would be lining prisoners up one behind another and shooting a gun in them to measure the bullet penetration. Victims would have their limbs removed only to have them reattached onto them backwards or on the other side of their body. One victim's torso was cut open and their stomach was removed. The researchers then attached their intestines straight to their esophagus to see what would happen. That was the thing. Most of it was to just see what would happen. The experiments went from studying the capability of germ warfare to just entertaining the researchers' morbid curiosity. To study the spread of venereal diseases, the researchers began forcing prisoners at gunpoint to be intimate with each other in order to spread the diseases because they said that they didn't get the same effects when they would inject them with the venereal diseases as they would getting them through getting the disease through contact. So they started making them essay each other at gunpoint. This resulted in a lot of pregnancies, and they would also study the women in various stages of pregnancy to watch like how the venereal diseases affected them and probably other things too. But they would also vivisect the pregnant women alive with the fetuses in them to look at the stages. And the babies born here weren't given any special treatment. They were also used for experiments. Um, there was one researcher who was particularly interested in the effect of frostbite on the human body, and one of his experiments included taking the hands of a 3-year-old child and soaking them in water containing salt and ice until frostbite took hold. Others would have their limbs frozen solid, and then they'd have them like thawed, and then they'd freeze them solid again, and then thaw them just to see what would happen. Some victims would be used to research how long humans could withstand going without food or water. They'd be put into superheated rooms to see how long they could last. Others were used to research G-force and what the human body could handle. Sometimes they would put victims in gas chambers to see how long they could survive if the dosages varied. Mind you, they're doing all these with the kids too. Like, they were putting kids in the gas chambers, and they were doing blood transfusions with the wrong type of blood just to see what would happen. Absolutely no survivor account exists. Everything we know of what went on here is from previous staff members. So you can only imagine like the horrors that really went on here
Mhm.
if there were any survivors to tell it. Um
Well, they made sure there was no survivors.
yeah, they killed every survivor. Everyone who went in there, they likely usually only lasted 2 months, and then they would be dead before that 2 months. I think the women were probably, I mean,
Kept longer because they would have to give birth.
yeah, the incubators, but typically they would not last very long. And there was one story of a staff member who went in there, and there were 2 women who asked for a mirror just so they could see their own reflection because they didn't know if they'd even be able to recognize themselves anymore. And it was a 21-year-old Chinese woman and a 19-year-old Ukrainian woman.
Mhm.
And if I remember right, the Chinese woman ended up being vivisected. Both women died, obviously, but the employee ended up smuggling in a mirror for them, so they could see themselves. So an estimated 3,000 victims were believed to have lost their lives in this facility. In the 1940s, Unit 731 started conducting experiments outside of the unit and onto innocent civilians in the surrounding area. Over the course of the war, 11 more cities were attacked similarly. Some tactics being used were handing out poisoned candy to starving children. How fucked up is that? Distributing infected clothing to those in need, contaminating supplies that were left out free in town centers, and dropping a ceramic bomb filled with plague-infected fleas on the population.
So
So,
basically making it look like they're helping them, but really
yep,
they're all part of this experiment too.
yeah. Apparently, a group of 20 Russian men were brought in because they had like this, kind of like a police force that would bring them in like victims.
Mhm.
And a group of 20 Russian men were brought in, and they really didn't even need them because they had more than enough victims. So the facility, under the guise of a vaccine, killed the men. They used an alcohol swab to clean the area, which obviously, if you're going to kill
Get it?
someone, you don't got to do
Yeah.
that. But they did it just to make the men believe that they were getting a vaccination. And then they injected them with, I don't remember what it was, but the injection killed them immediately. They would inject them, and the man would just fall backwards. And so they didn't even need the 20 men. And instead of letting them go or doing anything else with them, they just killed them on the spot because they had more than enough victims already. Um,
Wait, and these men were sent over from Russia?
they were taken from
Oh,
Russia.
okay.
Like
I was gonna say, like, how did they like explain that?
no, this the police, like this like police force, quote
Mhm.
unquote, would go around capturing
Okay.
people, and it'd be like farmers and just poor people, um, lots of prisoners of war. And then with the fleas, they actually bred these rats with the bubonic plague, and then like the rats had fleas, and so then the fleas bred
Mhm.
with the bubonic plague. So then they mostly like these fleas were like a big thing because then the fleas were infected, and they would put them in these ceramic bombs, which they didn't explode per se, but like when they
They
hit,
broke open,
yeah.
basically, yeah.
So
And
then the fleas would then just go and
didn't they do that, like
Yeah, I was
In
thinking
Mongolia or
yeah, that's
something?
what I was thinking. That was like a Mongolian thing, I thought. They threw it, like, over the wall and,
Yeah.
like, infected a whole
Yeah, that's
city.
what I was thinking.
Yeah. So they must have gotten that idea from that, because I think that happened in, like, the 1300s or something. It's estimated that up to 400,000 Chinese civilians died as their communities were destroyed by the bubonic plague, anthrax, typhoid, and cholera.
Isn't cholera like an old-timey disease?
Yeah, because you know dysentery is the pooping one.
Yeah, that's from, like, the Oregon Trail. Everyone died of dysentery.
And I thought anthrax, honestly, if you would have asked me before this, I thought it was a poison.
You can get, vaccinated against it. Cholera is also called blue death. It's a bacterial disease that causes severe diarrhea, dehydration, and it's usually spread in the water. And it can be fatal if it's not treated right away. So, like, same vibes as, like, dysentery.
Anthrax is a disease caused by a bacteria. It primarily affects animals, but can also affect humans through contact um, with infected animals or their products, or by inhaling or ingesting spores. It's not typically spread person to person. So I guess inhalation is a big way to get it.
Yeah, when you join the military, you get vaccinated against that.
That's so crazy. So while this devastation in these communities was happening, the researchers were publishing their findings in peer-reviewed journals. Under the guise of these experiments being done on long-tailed primates. So, like, they were publishing their findings and people were reading about it thinking that this was just happening
On monkeys,
on
which is
monkeys.
still not okay.
Literally, yeah. Um, and then another thing is that college students would come to Unit 731 to practice vivisections, but they didn't realize the extent of what was happening there,
Uh-huh.
because there were some stories of actual students coming there and like practicing on actual humans, because
Alive?
I guess
How do they
they might have knocked him out
explain
for that one. I
that?
can't remember, but they didn't think anything of it. They
Yeah, you would think that they're like, "Hey, these people are alive," and like, "Oh,
yeah,
wait."
like this can't be right.
Right.
On September 22nd, 1945. So the Unit 731 was open for 9 years, by the way.
9?
Mhm.
I thought this was just, like, short little thing.
No, from 1936 to 1945.
That's
And
a long time to keep a secret.
I know. On September 22nd, 1945, Japan intended to drop bombs containing millions of plague infected fleas into the cities in Southern California
What?
in retaliation from the US bombing Japanese cities. It's called Cherry Blossoms at Night. In August, the Japanese surrendered, thus ending World War II.
Thank God.
So we were like 1 month away. Well, California was. And then employees rushed to get rid of all the evidence since they surrendered. They rushed to get rid of all the evidence so that there was nothing to see here. They shredded all their documents, burned all evidence, and executed all remaining prisoners before fleeing back to Japan.
And they just trusted all their staff members?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's all good. Everyone, you gotta think like everyone was involved in this.
Right, but you would think maybe they would, like, kill everyone except for, like, the high ranking
I mean, they
people.
had like up to 3,000 personnel
That's a
working.
lot.
Um, so now finally the monsters behind Unit 731 could finally face their justice. Just kidding.
'Cause it was all kept a secret.
Nope.
What? What do you mean no?
No. Well, the US does what it does.
Well, that's true.
Granted immunity and all that jazz.
We granted immunity.
Granted immunity.
God.
Yep. Shiro Ishii, the
I
head.
mean, we did hire Nazis,
I know, isn't that
so
surprising? Shiro Ishii, the head researcher at this facility, was granted absolute immunity so long as he complied and handed over all the research he acquired at Unit 731 to the
except for
United
what they
States.
shredded.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Like, didn't they shred and burn
Yeah,
everything? What evidence is left? Um, and then Shirishi would go on to live another 14 years in wealth,
of course.
comfortably. until peacefully passing away in his bed from throat cancer.
Thank God he had
I
cancer.
was gonna say
If anyone deserves cancer, it's that
we
bitch.
can only hope he was miserable, at least with that, like that he was uncomfortable. And that's basically what happened with all the others too, is that they were just given immunity. The worst punishment given was a few years of hard labor. So
Really?
everyone just walked free. There's basically nothing. The Japanese government never acknowledged it until the 80s. Um, they denied it for so long. Japanese civilians didn't even know this happened for so long. But the Japanese government never even apologized. Like there was no apology. They just were like, yeah, it happened. YOLO. Moving on. They don't teach it in their school.
What?
Like this is a part of history they keep completely secret. In Harbin, China, there's a memorial museum to honor all those who lost their lives
Oh,
and the
that's good.
families affected.
I was gonna ask if there was a memorial.
And like in the museum, well, there's like in the Unit 7731 museum, there's like one of those, like when they make like architects make those little cities of like
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
basically have one of those of the units so you can like go in and see exactly like what there was. Um which is kind of cool. And then there's ethical debates for using the data from the experiments because one article I read stated that the data received from Unit 731 was so behind on what the United States already knew it was basically useless information, which would really,
Why did we give them immunity?
yeah, which that's what I was gonna say, which would really be a kick in the like a slap in the face because all these people got immunity just for the information to not even be useful.
Yeah.
But another article states that the information gained there was invaluable. So I don't know.
I mean, at least they know like everything that happened.
Yeah, but, like, it almost seems kinda tacky to even, like, use the information that we could have gotten from there. But then it really makes you wonder, like,
Why did we need that information? Like, what were we gonna do with it?
well, then, like, when you Google, like, "Oh, how long does it take for frostbite to set in?" Then you wonder, like, do we know this because of the
Mm,
information from Unit 731? Like, how do we know the information? I always thought it was from, like, the military,
yeah.
from, like, their
Experience,
experiences.
yeah.
Never thought that there would be, like, actual humans, and that could be where they get the statistics from. Uh, and then I also there's this book called Japan's Infamous Unit 731 by Hal Gold, and there were some things I wanted to read in here from it that I thought were kind of interesting. So, from the book, the part 2 is all of testimonies
Mhm.
where it's actual people who were, there, who were giving, like, things they saw and experienced. A lot of them, of course, are anonymous, but there are a few that, like, actually are names. Like,
Really?
yeah, they had the balls to admit what went on there. So from this book, quote, "Everyone connected with humans experiments wore a special button on the side of his hat. The Maruda were kept the logs were kept in cages on the top floor of a 3-story building." I read that the prisoners actually were fed good meals though because they wanted them to be like healthy.
Despite them infecting them and doing all this fucked up
Yeah,
shit.
yeah. They just wanted to, keep some of their variables. And the third floor where they were kept was always just called the third floor. Inside the door, the room was about 10 by 15 meters with cages all in a row. Most of the Maruda in the cages were just lying down. In the same room were oil cans with mice that had been injected with the plague germs and with fleas feeding on the mice. Around the perimeter of the room was a 30-centimeter wide trough of running water. The purpose of the trowel, which is wider than the distance over the area which the fleas can leap, is apparently to keep the fleas from going outside of the room. So they had the fleas in there with them, but then the fleas couldn't get outside of the room. And that was by an anonymous person who couldn't have the galls
How did
to.
they know that worked though?
How did they what?
How did they know that worked? The trenches of water.
Well, maybe that's how some of them got infected, like the one employee that got
Mhm.
infected by the plague. Another quote is in vivisections on living persons, sometimes chloroform is used to put the victim to sleep. At times it is not, and the person is cut open fully conscious. Um, this particular Chinese woman, he told me, was put under chloroform but regained consciousness on the table. She started getting up screaming, "Go ahead and kill me, but please don't kill my child." Another quote is, "At first, we infected women with syphilis by injection, but this method did not produce real results. Syphilis is normally transmitted through direct contact. Investigating the course of the disease can offer no useful results unless it is acquired this way. And so we followed a system of direct infection through sexual contact." Researchers started forcing prisoners into sexual acts with each other. A male and female, one infected with syphilis, would be brought together in a cell. It was made clear that anyone resisting would be shot. Once the healthy partner was infected, the progress of the disease would be observed closely to determine, for example, how far it advanced in the first week, the second week, and so forth. Researchers were able to employ live dissection to investigate how different internal organs are affected at different stages of the disease. Yoshimura Hisato, who later became head of the Kyoto Prefectural University of Medicine, was in charge of the frostbite experiments. One of his experiments was with a 3-month-old baby. A temperature sensing needle was injected into the baby's hand,
What
and the infant was submerged into ice water. Then temperature changes were carefully recorded.
the fuck?
And then he became a head at a university. From this, we can understand that he used babies born to imprisoned mothers. Records from China identify babies being born to pregnant captives and also women made pregnant through forced sex and venereal disease experiments. And these babies were also made use of the unit's experiments, which is so fucked up.
Well, and also we learned when we talked about the Tuskegee experiment that if a mother is pregnant, she has syphilis, that affects the baby's development.
And giving birth, aren't the babies likely to then get the
Yes.
disease?
Hmm.
So, I mean, not that I think most of these babies probably lived long enough to be affected by the disease,
Right. If
but
they weren't already born with defects because of it.
yeah. So this next excerpt comes from a professor at Osaka University. Um, when we first started studying at Kyoto, our instructor was an army doctor who told us that the practice of medicine is not for healing the sick and injured. Japan, he said, was fighting the world, and medicine itself must become a weapon. The instructor told us that animal tests alone were not sufficient for medical studies and that human tests were also necessary. He said that such tests had actually been carried out and showed us 6 movies that had been taken in Manchuria. One movie showed an experiment in which air was injected into the arms of living subjects to produce air emblems. The film showed the victims in progressive stages of the condition as they suffered to death. Another film the instructor showed us was a beheading with blood spurting from the body. I believe that Unit 731 research facilities were possibly the best in the world at the time. After they were blown up at the end of the war, the facts were revealed. This is a scar on Japanese medicine, but it also goes beyond being a mere scar. Unit 731 came about as a result of the medical thinking in Japan. Some of the experiments had nothing to do with advancing the capability of germ warfare or of medicine. There is such a thing as professional curiosity. What would happen if we did such and such? What medical purpose would be served by performing and studying beheadings? None at all. That was just playing around. Professional people, too, like to play, which I think that's gross.
What did they do with all the bodies? Like, how did they dispose of them? Is my question. To keep it,
Cremated. I
they cremated them.
believe they cremated them. I think they had like 6 big cremation things, tanks, where they would like cremate the bodies.
Mm.
But I know the beheading one I read about where there was like a hole dug because sometimes they buried the bodies. There was like a hole dug, and I think it was a student, like a student of the army or something, whatever those people are called, and he watched one of the workers just like chop a guy's head off and then just like push him in a hole. This one was from a member. This excerpt was from a member of the hygiene corps. One day we were told that instead of using straw dummies for bayonet practice, we would use people. We were going to practice on 5 people who had been brought in by the Ken Kenpaitai, which were like
The police
yeah,
force that they use to kidnap people.
yeah. We were told that they were members of the anti-Japanese resistance movement,
That doesn't make it better.
but when they were brought in, the prisoners, they were 17 or 18 years old. We were lined up in columns according to our unit, and the prisoners were tied in place. We were ordered to fix our bayonets. The boy at the front of the line was first. The commanding officer gave the orders: forward, back, forward, thrust. This was the first time I'd killed anyone. My legs were shaking. When you thrust, it should be done fast. I was afraid, though, and I closed my eyes so I don't know where I stuck the person. About 25 of us in turn, one after the other, stuck the prisoner. By that time, his shirt looked like a beehive with flat holes instead of round ones. That's how we killed. There was a concept in our education that one does not become an adult until he has killed someone. Before that boy's breathing stopped, I heard him crying, "Mama, Mama." And I realized that it's the same in China as in Japan. And that's so fucking sad to me. This is how we killed 5 Chinese for bayonet practice. After it was all over, we threw the bodies in a pit and buried them. The location was at a mountain with no farms or anything else around. I never went back there again, and I have no idea what happened to the bodies after that. And that was the education of the youth corps. One boy, one does not become an adult without killing. These were kids killing people.
Well, and the fact that I think this show also kind of shows like how they dehumanized each other. Like the fact that Mama was the same in both languages made him realize, oh my god, this is fucked up.
Yeah. And it's so sad because they say so many times when like soldiers are on the battlefield dying, like a lot of them will be calling to their mothers. The last excerpt I have, I mean, there's a whole lot, but the last one I saved was from um Shiro Ishii's driver. So like the man,
Like his chaperone.
yeah. There were different kinds of gas used for the test. They're talking about the gas chambers. There were different kinds of gas used for the test: mustard gas, lucite, cyanide, acid gas, and phosgene gas were all among the gases tested. 3 of the chamber walls were glass so that the conditions under which the victims died could be observed closely. Some of the martura were tied to a dolly that rode on rails into the chamber. Then the gas was piped in. We experimented with different concentrations. Photos and movies were taken, and very carefully notes were made, such as what sort of symptom a subject exhibited at how many seconds of inhalation. When the gas took effect, people would foam at the mouth. A person's respiratory organs are similar to those of a pigeon. Generally, a person can maintain life in a given environment if a pigeon can. So pigeons were put into the chamber with the marutas as a comparison test. Sometimes dogs were also put in. All sorts of comparison tests were made. This was Unit 731. It's disgusting
and fucked up.
It's really sad that Japan has never apologized. Because all we can do is learn from our past. We just need to just maybe stop experimenting on everything.
Yeah.
Animals included. Because honestly, we know enough now. There is no excuse to still have animal experimenting either.
And I feel like we have enough people with medical issues who would be willing to humanely participate in like treatment.
Especially if you give them like some money, like they're going to be all for that.
Yeah. Humanely is the key word here.
Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook at Paranoia Pair Pod. And we will see you next Friday.
Stay spooky.
Bye.